been a weird week. Queen's dead. My condolences.
Yeah, rest in peace, My Majesty.
What's
Sleep
been
well.
interesting is I work with quite a lot of British people, but I also work with quite a lot of people from Ireland, and I'm involved in different work group chats. So seeing the different reactions to her passing has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of the royals. I suppose growing up in a country where some random face is on your money is kind of a strange thing. You're like, why is that living person? There's something more tolerable about a dead person on your money where you're like, okay, maybe they did something to lead towards this bountiful and plentiful land that I'm now enjoying. But when someone's still around, you're like, hang on, it's not perfect here.
Which
You become a scapegoat. But yeah, I'm one of these people where it's like never been a fan of the royals. I just see them as a fucked up family, like all families are fucked up, and I just don't like the prospect of a figurehead who kind of still does have ultimate power, because the royalists in places like Canada and Australia will be like, no, it's a nice tradition, and let's be honest, those people are never gonna do anything crazy. They're just gonna allow the governments to do what they want to do. I don't subscribe to that, because every few generation, every family has a crazy fucking person, and if that crazy fucking person happens to be the eldest and next in line, well then they could do some wild shit with your government and country. So one of these people where it's like, I've never been a pro-royalist or interested in that family whatsoever. The coverage has been noxious and overwhelming and just so fucking strange, seeing them kind of parade her around the British Isles, the body, and just it's kind of, I don't know, medieval and kind of superstitious, and just it's really kind of highlighting how a lot of people do have an inferiority complex, like lining up in the street to say "Long live the king" and all that shit. It's kind of like, I don't know, it seems like a outtake from Shrek or something, when Shrek would wander around a town. And but anyway, I'm also kind of like, yeah, that she's still part of a family, and she was probably a nice person, and you know, she had kids and grandkids, and they should be allowed to grieve. And I don't subscribe to people on Twitter really putting the boot in and saying that, you know, trying to have a conversation about colonialism and racism now because a 95-year-old woman is dead, a 96-year-old woman is dead. So it's a pretty interesting Rorschach test for not just Commonwealth countries, other countries as well, because they're like, what the fuck is up with royalty? It's interesting being here because people don't kind of understand the concept of royalty. It's I guess more about status here. So anyway, lots of thoughts.
What's for me? I'm trying to pick the right word. I'm flabbergasted at the amount of people invested in the royal family, like not even British people, but people around the world. How boring and empty must their lives be that this is something that they connect to and hang on to? And I don't know. I'm also not a royalist. I find the whole thing in the 21st century baffling and backwards and ultimately just kind of shitty. And I completely get why the Irish would hate the royal family. I feel like they have every reason to. And that's nothing against her specifically, but what she represents and who her family is. And then I was reading that the funeral costs that the British taxpayers are going to pay is some exorbitant number, like £6 billion or maybe even more. But when you consider how much the royal family has and the inheritance that the king got from his mother's death, yet the taxpayers are paying for the funeral, like, come on, guys.
It was pretty wild the day she died, in that my experience of like, oh, the Queen is in trouble. And I clicked a link to go through the Guardian website, and I was just at home with my missus. And you know, when they have like a live sporting event, they have like a live feed of like what's happening. You know, like 15th minute, Real Madrid nearly score. 18th minute, oh, Barcelona hits the crossbar. They were doing a similar thing, but with the Queen's death. But they were like
Christ.
2:02 p.m. More paramedics have arrived at I was literally only just following along for 15 minutes towards the end, and it was so strange because of people on Twitter, people were like, "Thank fuck she's dead," or like, "Oh no, I'm gonna R.I.P. Her Majesty," but they hadn't announced it yet officially on the Guardian, and so I was trying to like relay the news to my missus as it was happening. And there was a period where I was like, about a minute, I was like, "Oh no, she's alright," and then I was like, "Oh no, she's dead," and then I go back to the Guardian, like, "Oh no, she's okay still." Yeah, no, and then eventually. The way I called the Queen's death in my home was when eventually the Guardian said it was just like whatever it was, 2:15 p.m. The Queen is dead. I just proclaimed to my household, I was like, yeah, she's cooked, which is pretty fucking Australian way to kind of let the my house know that Lizzie number two had was in a box. So anyway, R.I.P. and let's see what Chuck E. Cheese can do now that we've got his sausage hands all over the throne.
I give him a year. I think he's gonna be dead by year's end.
He can't seem to handle a pen with a little too much ink in. Have you seen that short snippet of footage yet, where he's trying to sign something? He's like, oh, hate these stinking things.
Oh, that's the one where he's yelling at his servants. I haven't seen that, but I heard there's a video where he's like, "You expect me to clear this shit by myself? Where are the servants?"
Yeah, those videos are always funny because it's kind of like, yeah, they've got cushy jobs and they've never done a real day of work in their life, but also their days are probably, especially at times like this, their days are probably completely full with all this ceremonial bullshit where they have to look a certain way and, you know, everything has to be followed to a T. So occasionally these people are I love it how we want them to be human. We don't want them to be different to us. But then when they act human, it's like, oh, that's disgusting. Like, you're meant to be better than us. It's like there is a hypocrisy in the way. I think that ultimately comes down to the fascination is that people who are fascinated by the royal family understand that it's false, but they believe in the fantasy more than the people actually involved in the game do. It's this strange thing where it's like it's only because it's like the spectators watching the players on the field know the game's bullshit, but the people in the stands love it so much. So the players are like, yeah, I guess I'll keep playing along, but I don't know. I find it farcical, but pretty entertaining to watch. I am sick of the coverage now, though. I think we can move on from. I just never understood, like, why would you want to see even someone close to me, someone died unexpectedly, I'd maybe want to say goodbye to the body once, like go and visit them in the hospital. You know what I mean? Like,
it becomes morbid after that.
Exactly. Like, it's, you know, the way they get them all kind of G'd out for the funeral and kind of like, you know, get them in the finest costume and get the makeup person in. And I don't know, like, you hear all these stories about how the fucking gas expels from dead bodies and shit after a certain amount of time.
At a certain point, I'm no longer thinking of the person or the individual. I'm thinking of the meat, you know, like the physical flesh and the biological actions. And it's just, it's gross. I don't want to be near it. It's depressing. It's morbid.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where I'm at with this. You know, I'm just thinking of that. What if that? How if they preserve that body? What's that body smelling like now? Ugh.
And I think it's just, I don't know. People think just being in proximity to a body of an important person or a famous person is somehow gonna have a special impact on them. Like I've been within like how do I phrase this? years ago, there was a premiere in LA for one of Quentin Tarantino's movies, and him and Brad Pitt were just like walking by people with cameras, shaking people's hands. Like I rubbed up against Brad Pitt. That doesn't mean anything though. Like I didn't become cooler or more desirable or more talented or anything. Nothing changed.
Yeah. Proximity. Yeah, we discussed this on another episode. We liked the concept of, as if their magic is going to somehow be, I don't know, what's the word, transmuted or just by touch. It's going to kind of like come through you or something. And what is the Woody Allen quote? It's like, I forget, most of success, 80% of success is showing up or something like that. So it's kind of like if you just are in the realm of these people, they're going to be like, you're with me now. Let's go.
Well, I think the Woody Allen quote is him saying I do to his stepdaughter. Is that not the one you're thinking of?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, 80% of betting your stepdaughter is just being around when she's a kid.
Well, that's what makes Woody Allen based. We could cut that out.
No, let's keep it in. We got, I reckon there's a future episode with a big fat Woody in there, or a little Woody, or whatever you'd prefer. So let all this kind of discussion about class and I guess privilege is kind of fitting. I'm trying to find a segue here.
You're good at them, so I expect this trend to continue.
Yeah. Well, today we're going to be talking about the Sky King, Richard Beebo Russell, who was responsible for the 2018 Horizon Air Q4 incident, where essentially what happened was a big fucking plane was stolen from the Seattle Tacoma International Airport in Seattle, and the perpetrator, 29-year-old Richard, known as Beebo to his friends Russell, was a Horizon Air ground service agent with no piloting experience. He performed an unauthorized takeoff, and he was just kind of flying around. He was in contact with air traffic control and having a very, very casual, rambling chat with them. Eventually, some fighters were kind of scrambled to intercept the aircraft, but I'm pretty sure that the air traffic control dudes let the fighters know that this guy was suicidal rather than kind of like a terrorist risk. So they were just kind of watching him. And he did some crazy shit. He did an amazing maneuver where, was it a barrel roll? What he did, where he kind of went.
See, I had always thought a barrel roll was when the plane flipped
on the side.
But
yeah,
what
me
he
too.
did is a backflip. Maybe that's called a barrel roll. I'm not a pilot. I only play one on TV. Whatever it was, the actual footage is quite astounding because he pulls it off and he's only like 5 feet above the water and he manages to keep going for a little bit.
Really fucking impressive. Yeah, and so afterwards they tried to kind of ascertain how he was able to do that with no experience, and I think they surmised that he was kind of like like the Malaysia Airlines guy. He was kind of playing around with the flight simulators, which seems to be a bit of a red flag. You know, when like serial killers, they find out that they were mutilating like little animals as children, and then that leads them to eventually killing humans. I think that if anyone in your life is fucking around with a flight simulator, maybe touch base with them, see how they're doing. But anyway, this is a fucking fast. And essentially, he eventually was running out of fuel, and he kind of he suicided by crashing the plane onto this remote island, kind of like just on the outskirts of Seattle somewhere. There was a bit of a fire when he landed, but no one was killed apart from himself. And he's become kind of like an internet hero, a meme lord, everyone calling him the Sky King. And yeah, I guess I'll get a little bit into his backstory as a person and who he was. But what are your thoughts in terms of this story, David?
Somehow I had never heard of this. It just completely went by me until you sent me the link. And I'm trying to wrap my head around this one. Like we've talked about some pretty dark things and depressing things and weird things. This story is on paper quite straightforward. The audio's there, the video's there. It's I don't want to call it cut and dry, but we see the order of events as they happened and as they played out. But I'm left with so many questions because we look at the Malaysia Airlines pilot, we look at the Vegas shooter, we look at worst of all Steve Renazizi, who and all their actions harm others. Whereas this guy was very adamant about not wanting to hurt others, and in the audio he says, "I know there are many people who care about me." So this whole thing, it's I just want to ask a big why, and I think that's everyone's question.
Yeah, in the video that I sent you, which I believe is something called like Coffee House Crime or something, where this British lad will go through a crime in about pull up a coffee, sit down, let's have some fun. And then, but he did a really good job. I shouldn't make fun of him because he essentially pieced together the story pretty well. And yeah, I found that for me, this story in the coffee house guy's appraisal of this incident, he was kind of making it almost a economic thing where this Beebo was unhappy because he was essentially grabbing bags as a flight. You know, when you land and then there's the dudes who kind of pull the bags off the plane and get them into the terminal. That was his job, and he was only through some loophole, even though the minimum wage in Washington at the time was $15 an hour, they were only paying him $12. And
that was the most shocking part of the story.
Yeah, well, and I think that in terms of like thinking about what's the bigger picture here, what's the adaptation here, is that I think what is appealing about Beebo and why he became a meme lord is that we all knew, everyone knows man children, the guys who were kind of like larger than life in high school, unpredictable, wacky, goofy. You imagine that they're going to just like rip into life and tear it up and be like, oh, this guy's unstoppable. He's got so much confidence. Everyone at school likes him. And then adulthood comes along and beats the shit out of them because being an adult is about compliance and kind of staying in your lane and not fucking, you know, like just being boring essentially. If you want to lead a kind of a rambling, unexpected, unique existence, you're probably going to get fucked over financially or socially. You know, you're going to be outcast because people are like, go to college, find a girl, get married, get job, have kids, retire, die. You know, everyone else, even no matter how much lust for life they have, they eventually kind of fall into line and start hitting those bullet points. And so those guys like Beebo don't fit the mold. And I think that it's probably pretty depressing. And, you know, I've always, the analogy that I've used for teenagehood or I guess young adulthood and actual adulthood is your younger years are kind of like the tailgate where it's you and your buddies outside the stadium drinking beer, grilling hot dogs, having fun, fucking around, playing your own music. You know, there's an element of freedom there and kind of like there's other people around you doing the similar stuff. So there's like intermingling of groups. You can easily bump into new people, like join another group or they're a part of your party now. And then the game starts and everyone's ushered into the stadium. You start to lose your buzz because you don't have access to your fucking cooler of beers anymore. Then you sit on a cold plastic chair and you are kind of like you can only really talk to those that are positioned around you, and you then have to kind of watch a game in compliance. Like that for me is and most people just do it. They just like, well, I bought the ticket, now I've got to watch the game. And so I see the people as like Beebo being like, fuck this. I like the tailgate more and getting up from their seat and walking around and still being kind of at the stadium, but lonely as fuck and not fitting in. So that's for me the appeal of people like this, and why he is endearing is because he didn't accept the rat race. And I'm extrapolating here because no one knows the full story, but at least from the snippets that we have is that seems to suggest what type of personality this guy had.
I mean, in a way, he's kind of the ultimate victim of the American dream. All the baby boomers, they got married, had a house without, having to take out a deathly mortgage, that had kids, and is like, all right, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, go to college, get a job, and continue the tradition. And he was like the all-American kid. He played football in high school, got married, and from pictures and from what I heard about him, he was like not the boy next door, but the good old boy. He was the good old boy that everyone expects to succeed. And I think he probably just he got a dose of reality. He saw what life was, and oh shit, like this is it. Like even if today's a decent day, tomorrow's gonna be the same, the next day and the next and the next. Like this is it. And in a way, the way he chose to go out, like what that's kind of, you use the word endearing, and I don't want to say heroic because that's a word thrown out too willy-nilly, but not everyone gets to go out with a bang, literally, and not everyone gets to like choose the means of how they go out. And a part of me thinks he might have been like really, really fucking happy when he did it. Motherfucker stole an airplane and pulled off a barrel roll.
Yeah.
I mean, in the voice recordings, obviously there is regret. He says, I know a lot of people are going to be disappointed and people care about me. But man, I can't, I don't know. I'm conflicted. I'm not endorsing suicide, but trying to be the cog in the machine that is, American society. I could see not wanting to be a part of that either, not really seeing any alternatives to it.
Yeah, I try and think back to my own life and how I was thinking when I finished high school and I was kind of looking out towards my future. And I guess the main difference between a place like Australia and the US is that there's way more of a safety net, where if you fuck around and you want to study for years, or you're just not going to be you're just not going to fall into abject poverty. You might be relatively poor, but you won't be kind of like completely fucked. And so I'm curious, with growing up in the States, did you have kind of like an awareness where you were like, I'm gonna go and study, and then that's gonna lead me up the ladder, rung after rung, and I'll be fine? Or were you kind of aware that like, oh shit, it's pretty dire if you don't find your path? Like if you fall between the cracks, you can kind of, even if you're from kind of like a stable middle class background as Beebo seemed to be, you can kind of like lose your mind or lose your way. Did you have an awareness of kind of like the high stakes of living in America despite being a first world country?
My awareness did not come, unfortunately, until it was already too late. And once I realized I was fucked, I was truly fucked. But I've also come to terms with the fact that not that I'm going to pull what the Sky King did, I plan to pass away before I ever pay that debt back. They're not getting money. Like, I'm going to let the record show that they're not getting my money because, one, I feasibly can't pay it back. It's just too much. And two, I don't want to. And that's even with Uncle Joe's 10 grand gift that he handed out, which essentially does fuck all in my case because I still owe so much that 10 grand, he might as well take $5 off.
So when you took on that loan at the time, were you thinking this is fine because I will just get a job as soon as I'm done with college and then I'll start paying it off, and then by the time I'm 30 it'll be all taken care of? Did you just assume that that was what was going to happen, or was it did you literally not think about it? Were you like, just like, whatever, this is what I need to do now. I need to go to college, so therefore I need to get a loan, and you didn't think beyond that?
This might seem like I'm trying to remove my own agency from the situation, but growing up, I kind of just like followed the steps without consciously thinking about it. It's just like, all right, college is the next step. That's what everyone told me. That's what my parents told me. And I'm going to go to college. Oh, have to take out a loan. That's what I have to do. I never thought about the consequences or the bigger picture. And I think I did assume, like, well, this is what people do. So I'll get a job. It'll be paid off. It's not something to worry about. Reality came about slowly and in a very brutal way. Like, again, that realization of, holy shit, I'm fucked. This is
Yeah.
fucked, and we're all fucked. But I'm in good company because a lot of my peers are fucked too, and they're a lot smarter and uh, wiser than I am. So if I'm in the same boat as them, it's not so bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of, and this, I definitely relate to everything you're saying because I just kind of went with the flow as well. But I guess I came from a country where they had their shit together a little bit more in terms of, the tertiary education hadn't become such a predatory business. And yeah, I got a loan, but it wasn't, my education comparatively was so cheap. And I was able to kind of like find a way to pay it off way quicker just because it was way less money than American people. And but I don't know, kind of thinking about that, turning this into a movie, that was my kind of inkling there, is that I would maybe want to, even though I'm not necessarily a political person, I think this is kind of like a political story in a sense, where maybe someone like Oliver Stone, who's pretty good at highlighting the inadequacies or the problems with American culture or American politics, would maybe do a pretty good job taking this on, because similar to the Malaysia Airlines flight concept that we discussed a few episodes back, you could have an action movie element to this where the movie begins with him rolling out the plane of the hangar and going out into the runway, and then maybe the air traffic control, like that relationship between him and the guy in the control is kind of like what initiates him, and then the liftoff, and then the rest of the movie is kind of like a flashbacks to him, going to high school in Alaska and then going down to North Dakota to play football, and then meeting his wife. The fact that he's a Christian I find interesting as well, because that there's maybe some element of even religion can't save you, even the community and the kind of nourishment, I guess this potential nourishment that would come with being in a position to feel comfortable with your death and all that. It wasn't enough for him to kind of, or maybe that was the thing that made him unafraid to kill himself. So I think that there is a kind of like a combination of an action movie and then also kind of like a political expose of like a rambunctious guy not fitting in with American society, and the sadness with those around him complying and losing their lust for life and just submitting to the bullshit around them. So that's what I'm kind of thinking in terms of what a interesting adaptation of this story would be.
And speaking of the air traffic controller, if there's anyone who's ever deserved a raise, goddamn, Like listening to how calm he remained the entire time, which I mean, I guess you kind of have to be because panicking isn't going to help anyone, but that's not something everyone's capable of doing. So the way he was just talking to the dude, pretty commendable. And I could already see a movie now of never even showing. Well, this is one way to do it, not showing the air traffic controller's face, just hearing him. So he's almost like this nebulous thing, but he's kind of the Sky King's last connection to humanity, the last person he speaks with before he dies. And I don't know if there's audio that isn't included in the video or if that video is every uh, bit of dialogue they shared with one another. But I feel like if you want to take artistic liberties, a good writer could add some really compelling dialogue.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm not too sure. Yeah, I have a feeling that there'd be perhaps the full transcript out there. So yeah, you could go through that and fuck around. But yeah, so I think that's what I'd be doing here. But are you a fan of Oliver Stone? Have you seen many of his movies?
I think Oliver Stone is phenomenal. He's a crazy son of a bitch who has some really retarded political views, but you know, a broken clock is right twice a day. Like he says a lot of sensible things too, and there's a lot of merit to what he says. But then like he's also kind of like a Putin sycophant, so it's like what is this guy doing? Having said that, he's made some of my favorite movies. I just recently rewatched Talk Radio. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, I've seen that a while ago. But yeah, I remember enjoying that. I must have seen that like a decade ago.
Super
Yeah.
underrated movie. And it's not completely in one location, but it almost is. And I really love claustrophobic one location type movies, whether it's a cabin or a room or something like Reservoir Dogs. And this movie could almost be that to some extent, with a lot of it taking place in the cockpit, a lot of it
Yeah.
taking place in the plane. And I also really love JFK, which Oliver Stone did. And I'm so sick of people telling me, well, you know, so and so didn't exist, or like that part. It's a fucking movie. I don't care how much of it is real. The conspiracy aspect of it all is fun. I don't care if it's accurate to life. It's a fun movie to watch.
Do you think yeah, because I think Oliver Stone, I'm not sure, he's essentially like a socialist, right? That's he's heart in his sleeve, and you know he's gone over to Cuba and hung out with Castro, and like you said, he's a fan of Putin and all that. But it seems like not from a totalitarian, strongman perspective, more because of the political ideology, or at least what was in the past kind of prevalent in Russia. But do you feel like America could ever become more socialist? Because I've just had this interesting recent experience where I spent a week back in Colombia. When I lived in Colombia at the time, there was kind of a right-wing government where Colombia were always kind of the strongest U.S. ally. Duque, the president at the time, was a fan of Trump, and since I'd left, I think it was about 6 months ago, there was a center-left government that had come in, and a lot of the people that I knew there, and predominantly a lot of them were kind of gringos like myself, were wary of where that was going to lead, because at the time that the new president, was billing himself as like a center left president, but everyone was like, oh, the writing's on the wall, this is going to become a new Venezuela, and they're starting in the center and then they're going to go further and further left, and it's going to lead to chaos. So that's their side of the story. But then you read about like, why did a leftist person get elected, and it's because like it's some crazy percentage where I think it's like 40 or 50% of Colombians are living on one meal a day. And this is like supposedly a country doing pretty well, where still tons of Venezuelans are coming into the country because their country is fucked. So there's kind of a reason why a socialist government came in, where they could perhaps, the poor people could get more help. So for the future of America as the gap widens between haves and have-nots, do you ever see a more socialist, more explicitly not just a champagne socialist government coming into power and staying in power for a significant amount of time?
I mean, goddamn, the way I see it, America has two right-wing parties. There is no left party. I personally don't see it happening. I mean, I was a Bernie guy. I would have been all for it, but I don't. I think Americans are too stupid for it to happen.
Yeah, but I would tend to agree because I think that like the the Democrats are a frustrating entity because, like you said, they seem to talk through both sides of their mouth, where you can't take care of the common man, and then also the titans of industry at the same time. Someone needs to get fucked over, and
I
it
mean, that's why
always tends to be the working man.
they latch on to something nebulous. They everything now, whether it's movies, sports, it's always woke politics or cancel culture. They're things that you can't really give a concrete definition to. The culture war. Oh my God, the Little Mermaid's black. Like the Democrats are trying to destroy children. Or oh my God, they're teaching about gay people in school. It's like, are they though, or they're things that it has nothing to do with the economy, nothing to do with infrastructure, nothing to do with healthcare, like things that really don't fucking matter. But as long as they make that the topic of debate for the next 1,000 years, no, we're never gonna have a socialist party. We're never even gonna come close.
Hmm. Yeah, something that I've been thinking about recently is how you have countries that are supposedly extremely proud, nationalistic, and kind of like have a lot of pride. But then every place that you come across, there's always internal rivalries between like towns or even like the north and south divide of a town. But like where I'm from, north of the river and south of the river, people will like fist fight each other drunkenly in pubs. But then if Australia was invaded by Indonesia, everyone would like automatically be like, "Oh, we're all Australian." Like, there's a greater evil, so we'll put aside our minor squabbles and come together. And so, I wonder, like, does that exist everywhere? Like, do people in more homogenous societies, like for example Japan, do they have kind of like regional or kind of just like internal squabbles as much as other places in the world? Because like America, it's extremely pronounced because there's like a racial component, there's an economic component where they're warring internally. Yeah, and the idea I was playing around with the other day is that if you're always kind of on edge and you feel like you have to defend what's yours, even from your like fellow Americans, does that make you like more aggressive? Because you're just like, well, other countries, they play nice with each other, and they feel no reason to kind of like bicker or fight. But because Americans are kind of like always in the gym. So therefore, if you're roided up and always in the gym, and then you hear that some other gym has been talking shit about yours, then you're the guy that you've just been beating up. You say, let's put aside our kind of like our sparring match and let's go beat the fuck out of other people. So I've wondered, like, in terms of the way the parties, the elites, which is a fucking loaded term, but let's use it for now, whether they kind of that's the rationale to keep American society so on edge and people at each other's throats here, because that allows them to weaponize that anger and direct it outwardly so that they will invade other countries and they will do all that crazy shit overseas because that's just what the culture they're used to when they're living here.
I wonder if in America such an attachment to a political party, which is just so bizarre to me, to like make that your ride or die thing. Like I align myself with this. I wonder if it's a lack of inherent American culture. And I'm not even sure if I know what I mean by that. But it seems to me that America being as diverse as it is, but also coming from a puritanical background, which is about, eliminating everything except devotion to God and plowing the fields. America kind of eliminated like a cultural identity, whereas other countries are, even if there's, you live on that side of the train tracks, I live on that side of the train tracks. I feel like there's more of a connection and more of a commonality between people, whereas Americans don't have that. So what do they latch on to? Political ideology, which sounds fucking stupid, but I guess you latch on to what you can.
Trying to understand where generations are at politically is always tricky as well, because I guess the loud voices that you hear on the internet are by default a minority, because the vast majority of people aren't on Twitter or getting into flame wars over stupid bullshit. But I saw this recently in kind of podcastistan. There was this show called Come Town, which kind of dissolved because one guy left.
Right.
Stav left, and so then Nick and Adam continued under the rebranded moniker, the Adam Friedland Show. And Adam, who's kind of like the straight guy, and Nick's the kind of funny, zany one. Adam used to date this chick from another New York-based podcast called Red Scare. Have you ever heard of Red Scare?
Isn't it like two Russian chicks or Russian-American chicks?
Yeah.
They're actresses, or one of them's an actress?
One's an actress, the other one, she's kind of like an intellectual, and they're very kind of like New York intelligentsia. And originally the actress girl, she got famous because she got interviewed by a InfoWars reporter, and she was wearing a beret, and they started calling her like Socialist Sailor Moon or something, because she just looked like a lefty. And there's a funny interview with her. But anyway, so they were people who kind of like, both Comtown and Red Scare were associated with what's called like the dirtbag left. And so they were essentially online people who could kind of like roast themselves and right-wing people, and they would make horribly racist jokes, but kind of they're making fun of racism as opposed to like the actual groups that they're. So anyway, that was the appeal of the shows and all that. And on this recent clip I saw, because Dasher and Adam used to date, I think they were engaged, and that ended horribly. But they did this kind of like meta skit where Red Scare came onto the Adam Friedland Show, which is now has a video component, and Adam initiated. I'm not sure if it was the start of the interview, but the start of the clip I saw, he said to the Red Scare girls like, "Oh, so you guys are racist now?" And because they went down and saw Alex Jones in Texas a while ago and were shooting guns with them, and they were like, yeah, that's what people are saying. Yeah, we're right wing now. And then Adam was like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, we're center left. That's kind of where we stand. And so it's this kind of like performative weird bit playing on kind of like the public knowledge of this prior relationship between them and the awkwardness of it. It's kind of like a Tim and Eric type of vibe they were going for. But anyway, what I got out of it in relation to this was like how irrelevant political labels and associations are to our generation, and how we don't the concept of people who grew up on the internet, where we've been able to craft our own idiosyncratic identities by just cherry picking things that we enjoy, to them to forego all that, to be like, I like LCD sound system, I like wearing corduroy jackets, I like lattes with almond milk, to be like, that's our whole identity. We like taking individual things to be like, no, fuck that, I'm now a Democrat, or I'm now a Republican. It's like, even if that's better, right? Maybe you do need to be conformist if you want to see actual like societal change. But I'll tell you for fucking free, our generation is not going to be doing that. We love these quirks, we're in love with our own kind of like our own kind of playlists and likes and dislikes and our cultivated sense of personality is everything to us. So just watching that clip kind of solidified my belief that it's going to be very difficult for a political party to come along and successfully gather at least millennials who are at least middle class and up, or even lower middle class, because yeah, the Spotify playlist is going to speak to us way more than any political party ever could.
Look, stealing a plane and doing some barrel rolls seems pretty good right about now. Like honestly, I see nothing wrong with what he did, other than destroying someone else's property and stressing out that poor air traffic control guy.
Yeah, and what about just now you're boots on the ground in Japan? Do you and I appreciate that the language is foreign and much of the culture would be still, but are they? Do you sense do people in Tokyo look down upon those in regional areas? Do you get a sense for any type of like the same type of bullshit that happens in America elsewhere, or are they kind of like, do they seemingly get along better with one another internally?
It's so hard to get a genuine opinion from anyone in Japan about anything. Like people don't want to stick out. I mean, they'll say this themselves. I'm not generalizing, and like I'm not saying anything offensive. Whatever the consensus is, they will just reiterate that. Whether it's in the classroom, at work, no one wants to say anything that will make them stand out. And I can't really say if one city looks down on another city. Like where I live in the Kansai area, like people say like, oh, they have funny accents there, and that's where all the comedians come from. But they say it more so in an endearing way, not necessarily a belittling way. I'm sure if I was here a bit longer and had a better grasp of the language, I would pick up these things. Like for example, when I lived in Russia, it was a lot more clear. If we're talking about people who serve in the military, more often than not, it's people from very, very rural areas and also a lot of ethnic minorities. So whenever someone from Moscow would suddenly show up in the army, everyone fucking hated that guy. It didn't matter if
Mm.
he was a competent soldier or not. Just by pure virtue of being from Moscow, like that guy needed to go fuck himself. So in Japan, I haven't really encountered anything like that yet.
Mm. It's interesting you say no one wants to kind of like stand out or be different. It's kind of like the opposite of
Yeah,
America, where
yeah.
everyone's like encouraged to be what is your thing, and thinking about the fact that we've like written books and you have to kind of like create an online persona to be like, oh, this is who I am online, and as a kind of like a song and dance to get people to maybe want to buy your book. Um, it's tricky because a lot of people online are just extremely overblown, enhanced versions, caricatures of themselves, because that makes more of an impression that aligns with the algorithm. So have you ever have you ever kind of thought about like, oh, if you were going to try and take things to the extreme, what's the extremely online version of David R. Lowe, where you would be having the most online conflict and like get generating the most buzz possible? What things would you double down on, or what kind of like phantom limbs of hatred would you grow to try and become as noxious as possible online?
And uh, see, even in my wildest imagination, I can't allow myself to think that way. Like I'm a realist. Like even work requires you to be online now. Even if I went as long as I could without having a smartphone, but work's like, hey, you need to be available. You need these apps. You need to log in using this app. You need to fill out payroll forms using that app. So it's necessary. And I have most the social media, with a few exceptions. However, I feel like I'm pretty tame when it comes to sharing my life or promoting myself and even doing things that I have to do. As someone who's written a book, you kind of fucking have to promote yourself, and I hate it. I'm bad at it. I'd rather
Mm.
just not do it. I'd rather not get paid than like humiliate myself trying to figure out how the fuck I'm supposed to do marketing. I am trying to answer your question because it's a fun question. I'm not trying to be dismissive about it. I don't know, man. What would you do? Like, what's your extreme online version?
Well, yeah, I guess for a while I was shit posting on Twitter where I would be because that was a fun writing exercise where it would be like, okay, you know how people complain about things on Twitter get taken out of context, and I was like, that's actually that's actually interesting because you can say things where people can take it the wrong way, or they can take it in either direction. They can kind of understand the ironic take, or they could be like, he's right, women suck. And so there was a part of me, like a gleeful kind of demon part of me, where it was like, oh, I like I like people getting, both way, like both. That, and I guess with my book as well, I kind of was trying to do that. Like I've had some personal messages about my book where I was like, "Oh, you took it far too literally. Like you didn't understand the what I was kind of going for." But I'm not complaining either because I think I was purposefully dog whistling in situations where I want people to kind of realize in 5 years that I was fucking with them. Like that, and I don't think I even did it in a very sophisticated way. There are people who do it way better, but there's a part of me where I think that if you're gonna write satire, you have to make things attractive to people that you hate so that you can kind of like Trojan horse your way into their brain. Whereas if you do just kind of like straight up shit on things in such an explicit, obvious way, then those people are just they're going to turn away before they even enter. So I think that's kind of like the fun way that you can use the written word to manipulate um, people that you don't agree with because you kind of like you're giving them some like tasty treats that they enjoy, like a few throwaway things where you're like, yeah, maybe here's some common ground, but then you're potentially also giving them the opposite message that they'll only realize later on. So I like I like that on Twitter and like that. The problem is that I don't think I could ever deliver some things I've said on Twitter or some of the lines I said in my book with a straight face on a podcast or a video or something like that because I couldn't commit to the bit. I'd need to I'd literally need to wear a different outfit and do my hair differently and like that would just be too exhausting. So
That's
if I'm really thinking about what I would like if I was going to do something, I do actually subscribe to the fact that like certain parts of certain cultures are better than others. So I don't align with cultural relativism. I think that there are bad ideas in the world that permeate through certain cultures and they should be ridiculed and made fun of. So if I really was going to double down, I'd that's potentially my angle. I'd be like, look at this fucking country, like Dubai, the culture of Dubai or something like, where I'd be like, look at these fucking morons, and I'd really go after places like that, but explicitly. See, I'm already kind of backpedaling from what some people do because I'd be like, I wouldn't make it a race thing or a religion thing. I'd be talking about just literally the stupidity of building these high rises where they hadn't thought of plumbing or stuff like that, and just how they're the false glitz and glamour of places like that is fucking retarded. And people from hundreds of years ago had way more of an idea to how what like opulence or glamour should look like versus these fucking cashed up retards in the Middle East. Or so that's if I was going to be like more extreme, I reckon I'd probably go after shit like that. But yeah, again, I'd try and be like, so I wouldn't be focusing on the race or the religion angle. It would be more about just kind of people who have adapted to kind of modernity or post-modernity in really fucking infantile or stupid ways. So I guess I do kind of touch on stuff like that occasionally, but it's it's never done. I think I could be I could be monetizing that in a way. I could be dog whistling to the extreme to get um, more actual racists and actual kind of like anti Islamophobes in the door if I kind of was like more aggressive in that messaging.
I thought of an answer, and it's still pretty boring, but it's the best one I. But it would also like there would have to be a lot of this had to have happened previously for this to happen. I would kind of want to be able to do what Ricky Gervais does, where he's so comfortable with how much money he has, and because he has an interesting life. He didn't become famous until he was already well into his 40s. So like he was pretty much established as an adult human being, and he didn't have to invent his views or change them to fit into some kind of zeitgeist. So that's why he could do the Emmys or Grammys, whatever award show, the Golden Globes, and completely shit on everyone and like not really face any consequences. That's who he is. That's why on Twitter he could call everyone a cunt and say the jokes he says, and no one's gonna say, "Oh my God, is Ricky Gervais gonna get canceled?" He's uncancelable, and so
Yeah,
I like that he does troll, but there's always some merit to who he trolls or how he's trolling. It's never just for the sake of being an edge lord, and that's including his usage of the word cunt or other slurs. And I just think, goddamn, I'm jealous of that man's life. I really am.
yeah. I think sometimes he's pretty kind of like on the nose a little bit, and yeah, like some of his for example, like that TV show Afterlife, like even just from the trailer or stuff like that, I was like, there's no way I can watch that. It's too Derek. It was way too fucking like obvious the kind of like emotional takeaway you have. But yeah, he's definitely someone with kind of like a moral compass where he has principles, and so therefore they're strong within him. So whatever he says, he can kind of relate it back to be like, well, this is why I said that. Because these are the things that I actually care about, and I'm using my jokes to kind of like leverage all that. So yeah, I think that he's definitely in terms of like being able to establish yourself and your audience really gets what you're going for. He's definitely someone to kind of you can admire because you kind of understand his audience understands him, which I suppose that we're all kind of looking for that. But then I really haven't done the work of of being like, well, what do I stand for? I'm just shooting from the hip. And
Sure.
whereas I think he's like a student of philosophy and he's really thought about like what are the important things in life and in my life, and he filters his art through that. I don't I I don't know why, but I've haven't felt the need to do that yet. I'm just
I don't
shooting
know
from
if
the hip.
you heard them, but his recent series of podcasts with Sam Harris were quite good. They were pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
listen to them. Yeah,
And that's just a combination I never expected that the fat dude from The Office and Extras is going to be, like
pretty
having
deep.
really compelling conversations with Sam Harris. But that's the
Yeah.
day we're living in. Uh, what I don't want to just be that guy who repeats bits, but we talk about the internet and internet culture and just how the internet has given a voice to everyone, mostly people who shouldn't have a voice. And there's this woman complaining. I assume she's a woman, actually. There's no proof that Ricky Gervais, his jokes about peanut allergies were in bad taste because she was like, my daughter suffers from peanut allergies, and you shouldn't joke about that. It's a serious thing. And he says, like, I've made jokes about like rape and racism and the Holocaust, but you're upset about peanut allergies. And she said, yeah, well, in the Holocaust they weren't killing children, were they?
Wow.
So
Yeah.
that's why I cannot engage on the internet. I used to argue with people in the comment sections, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or some sort of message board. But for one, who even knows if these are real people anymore?
Mm. Yeah, I saw this. I had this moment in high school where one of my teachers, he disclosed to a few of us that his wife had suffered a stillbirth. Um, I, I think a few years before that, and it wasn't kind of like an emotional share or anything like that. Like he clearly processed it and he was just like, oh, this happened. But the few of us that he told, it was like, oh, wow, that's heavy shit. And kind of like the first time that I'd heard kind of an adult say something like that to me and kind of like said, oh, yeah, this happened in my life. And so I was kind of aware of it. And so some time passed. And then, because he was kind of like the cool teacher where we could kind of like be rough around the edges with him and he wouldn't give a shit. And this other kid, in my class, he made a joke to this teacher where the punchline was like throwing a newborn baby in the bin, just being like, "Oh, this one's no good. Throw it away." Like I don't remember. It actually had kind of like a setup and punchline, and it functioned as a joke. It wasn't just kind of like teenage edgelord shit.
Yeah.
But the punchline was like, "Oh, there's a dead newborn baby. Throw it away." And I was like, and this is one of the kids who didn't hear the original disclosure, right? So he was unaware that he
Right.
wasn't heartless and be like, oh yeah, that guy's had experience with a dead baby. Let's tell him this joke. So, but I got to kind of see the car crash, like unfold, and I saw the teacher's face, and I swear I could detect an element of like, oh, that's bringing up some bad memories. But he just kind of like gave a half kind of chuckle and moved on. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's like someone who could have like every right to be offended or like have his nerves stomped on because it's something that he's personally experienced, but he's choosing not to kind of push his personal history on a kid who was unaware, and he's just trying to essentially just trying to bond with this teacher and like pass some time or whatever. And I
That's
was
the
like,
way
yeah,
to do it, isn't it? I
yeah,
mean,
well, that's
uh,
that's that's
imagine
what you
going
want.
through, yeah, imagine going through life just assuming every interaction you've had involves a dead baby. Like that's the alternative. Like meeting this person like, all right, no dead baby jokes, no peanut allergy jokes, no 9/11 jokes because goddamn that happened to me where I made a 9/11 joke and it turns out the guy's dad died on 9/11. Holy shit, what are the odds?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's the thing is that like I try to because still to this day nothing that horrible has ever happened to me, and so you kind of like you think about, well, if that does happen in the future, what will how will I deal with moments like that where people who are unaware of my private predicament step on my toes? And I want to try and be the guy who just brushes it off, and that's what I'm intending for. And I think that you can still allow yourself to be like, yeah, if you're have a personal motivation or a kind of like a cause you believe in, there are certain contexts where you can pursue that and champion your cause or whatever, and that can be your identity. But it can't be your identity in every situation around strangers who don't fucking know you or what you're all about.
That's called having a big ego and like an inflated like sense of your own value to think that every conversation and every event somehow revolves around your past trauma.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's what Gervais and comedians in general are navigating. They're navigating individuals' egos, and it must be a fine line for like a comedians, especially big comedians, because yeah, they'd be getting so much blowback from people who just have minor gripes because of their own personal predicaments. But then you can maybe also go too far in the other direction by being like you say something that's completely unfunny and not and it has no taste whatsoever, and they'll be like, "Ah, you guys are just letting your own bullshit get it." Like that's why it's humor. It's
Right.
because it's transgressing everyone like the established thing that we have in people's like it's like you've gone into the realm that you're not meant to go. That's why it's funny.
I mean,
So
trying to explain why a joke works is trying to explain why a certain chord progression in music moves you a certain way. It just kind of does, and you know when a joke doesn't land and when a joke does, and it could be about the same topic. It could be a dead baby joke, and if it makes you laugh, it's not because it's about a dead baby, it's despite that, and it still made you laugh. That's the art about it.
yeah, yeah, and you're even if your intentions are pure, you're like, I was trying to make people laugh. You, yeah, that's where it becomes like shock comedy, as opposed to just like, yeah, you got to do both, right? If you want to try and do shock comedy, you still got to make people laugh
You still
at
have
the
to
end
make
of the
people
day.
laugh. And I'm pretty sure I've used like this made up comedian before, but there's always that, like middle-aged white dude who's not getting laughs, and he goes, "What? I just call it like see it, like what best to take a joke." It's like, no, man, you're just not funny. You suck. You're
Yeah,
bombing.
yeah, yeah. Um, oh yeah. Well, I want to do one more hypothetical, but just to wrap this up, in terms of playing Beebo, this guy is kind of like who's kind of a very radicalized, has a very radicalized online persona. His name's Alex Stein 99, where he's this Twitter performance artist guy. He's the guy who was harassing AOC at the front of the White House recently. Did you see him?
No, but that's a good story.
Well, basically, he's this guy who kind of like he ambushes politicians, but he dresses like Tucker Carlson, and he's like this. He's got this kind of like the most punchable face in the world, and big cheesy grin on his face. He's like,
Alex
"Hey,
Stein.
Alex Stein 99.
I'm
I'm
looking
a
him
pimp
right
on a blimp."
in.
But he's just someone who's kind of like he's playing into the hand. You can tell he's completely apolitical. He's a comedian. He's kind of like a conservative Sacha Baron Cohen type of thing. But basically, he ambushes politicians and waves to them. And to AOC, he was saying like, "Oh, it's AOC, my favorite big booty Latina. You love killing babies. You love killing babies." And he'll just kind of like push all of their their kind of indiscretions, whatever they've done with in their career, and say it to their face and kind of do it in a cheesy way. Anyway, I find him kind of relatively amusing, and I don't believe he's actually conservative. I think he's just trying to make a name for himself and be a Sacha Baron Cohen type of person. But anyway, in terms of this movie, he's just got the same vibe as Beebo, where he's just got this similar type of face and similar type of lust for life. So I think that Alex Stein 99 could play Beebo Russell in this movie. Oliver Stone to direct. I love the concept of the air traffic controller guy staying remote, and yeah, that's about it. That's my bullet points for this movie.
Would you do stunt casting though? Like pick a famous person whose face we never even see, we just hear their voice, but
Oh,
someone
that's true. Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. Well, who are you thinking in terms of who would do a good job for that kind of like voice? Or maybe Clooney?
holy shit. Yeah, Clooney wasn't even on my radar. Has he been in a movie recently?
I don't believe so. I haven't seen him in something in a while, but yeah, because Clooney is always he's got that kind of like it's always sexy. So it'd be interesting maybe to be like have Clooney be the voice, but enforce that he takes the sex out of his voice. He's just dry and he's trying to be like, because he's just someone, he's got the you want to be, women want to be with him, men want to be him type of vibe, and so he's extremely trustworthy. But yeah, you want to, I guess I'm thinking of, why I'm thinking of Clooney? It's because in Gravity you hear Clooney's voice.
That's right. Yeah.
That's probably where I'm getting that reference from. But yeah, I'd imagine he would, because you want someone incredibly charismatic and memorable, but then I also wouldn't want him to be like, Bieber's going to land the plane because he wants to go grab a beer with Clooney.
Right. If he's too sexy, it's just like, God damn, you talking me out of this. Like, I want to come hang out with your ass.
Yeah. But anyway, well, R.I.P. Sky King, and and the final hypothetical, similar question in terms of how would you radicalize your online persona, but like, let's say in a hypothetical world, you could meet yourself at a bar, right? And so this is a situation where, or it's at a party, you get introduced to yourself by a mutual friend, and it's a situation where it's kind of like a parallel universe where you are you, right? Each David 1 and David 2, you're both you, but you, for some, in the quirk of this, you don't acknowledge, you're interpreting each other as new people you've never met before. How does that interaction go? How does that interaction go? And then what do you think of each other afterwards, after the interaction ends?
I'll tell you. Every time in the past, and it's always been a female friend because this is just how they are, they'll always say something along the lines of, you have to meet my friend so and so, another girlfriend. You guys are so similar. You'll hit it off. You're going to love her. And it's like, all right, I'll meet her. And then we actually meet. And I want to strangle my friend for introducing me to this person. One, it's insulting that you think we're similar. Two, I fucking hate this person. Why did you think I need to meet this friend of yours? Like, how low is your opinion of me that you think I'm going to like this person? So if that's how they see me in their eyes, I could only imagine if I met me, who is me, but for some reason my brain doesn't register that I'm also that person, but it is me. I would probably fucking hate that guy. I would think this guy sucks so bad. And it would probably be one of those things where I'm immediately texting my friends who are also in the room, like, holy shit, this guy blows. Like, he looks like that one fucking terrible showed actor that no one likes. Like, look at this fucking retarded dickhead.
Wow. So you don't think that you'd find any common ground whatsoever with David too?
Would you? Not with David,
well, yeah,
but with Thommy too.
With Thommy too, I've thought about this a lot. There would be a very false sense of companionship, and I reckon there'd be like lots of backslapping and like, yeah, let's do shots, and there would be like, kind of maybe up to an hour of surface level but very jovial conversation, and yeah, maybe a few tequila shots, a few kind of like stories shared, and kind of a bit of playful banter. But then as soon as it's like, all right, catch you later, man, in my head I'd be like, oh, thank fuck that's over. Like, I'm sick of that guy. That guy's a fucking phony. That would be my. I think that when I meet people similar to myself, it's almost kind of like opposites attract, likes repel each other. But I fight that in the moment. I'm like, no, I'm gonna give you a chance. I don't want you to know that I know that we're similar and that I fucking hate your guts. I'm gonna go along with the, hey man, you're a cool guy. But in my head, I'm like, yeah, this is never gonna work. Just playful banter. Let's keep it nice and easy. And then just as you walk away, it's like, yeah, never again. That guy's
straight up refuse to have fun at the party. I would put myself in such a bad mood that I would sulk until like my friends agree to leave.
And is it because you this is interesting. Is it because you dislike yourself, or would you dislike the fact that there's someone at the party who's just like you?
I think I just wouldn't like him very much. I would be very judgmental. I'd be like, that guy fucking looks stupid. Look at the way he's dressed, and listen to how loud he is, and he's not that interesting. Like, he thinks his stories are interesting, but he's so inarticulate, and he's mumbling, and his story's going on forever, and there's no fucking point to his joke.
Yeah. Like everyone feels self-conscious in public, and the whole thing, like, don't be worried about your sense of self-doubt because everyone's feeling it. And it's like, yeah, that's true, but everyone has a differing level of self-doubt. Like, yeah. George, you could, and I've always, it would be interesting if you walked into a party and you kind of like had God mode and you could see like a visual representation of everyone's self-doubt. Like George Clooney and Brad Pitt still have self-doubt, but they're maybe on a 2 or 3% out of 100. 5% if they're hungover and their wife has left them that day. Whereas the average, I don't know, millennial might be walking with fucking student debt coming out their ears, might be walking around with like 45% self-doubt. So I've always found that such a funny. It's meant to be cast this like warm fuzzy blanket over us, be like, yeah, everyone doubts themselves sometimes, like no one's sure of their appearance. It's like, yeah, but that's some people can brush it off by doing like 20 bicep curls and then they feel fucking strong again.
It's like, again, George Clooney's just our guide today. If for some reason he tried out for a role and they cast Brad Pitt instead of him, it's not quite the same as like the 19-year-old who doesn't get hired at Starbucks, even though there's 9 to 30 of them. It's not, oh, well, just apply to the next one. George Clooney will be fine. That guy so much.
Yeah, totally. But all right. Well, yeah, I think this is fun. We need to think of some more kind of some parallel universe hypotheticals to really get to know one another and to really showcase our personalities to the audience a little bit more.
Absolutely.
All right, another one in the bag. Thank you, Senor David. That was fun.